Okay, so now we're going to talk about some legal and ethical considerations in nursing. These things are not going to be new to you. The law may be somewhat different in regard to emergency medicine. So if you're a paramedic, make sure that you understand the scope of practice um, differences between that and nursing. But it's always a good refresher. So we're going to start first with what are the sources of law. There are different types of laws that we have to deal with. We have constitutional law, and where that would apply to healthcare, to nursing, is going to be civil rights. We cannot violate the civil rights of another person. We also have civil rights as nurses. There's criminal law. How does that affect nursing? There are crimes that nurses can commit in the practice of nursing. We're in a position of power over vulnerable people, and so there have been nurses that have committed criminal acts. That we also are a population that is at risk for substance abuse, which can lead to substance diversion, which is when it becomes a legal issue, or to practicing while impaired. And nurses are also subject to criminal background checks because there are some criminal acts that would by nature make someone maybe not fit for nursing. If someone has a history of exploiting vulnerable others, they maybe should not be allowed to enter the profession of nursing. But we also, criminal law affects nursing in other ways. We also are sometimes witnesses to, if not the act itself, we may be witnesses to the consequences of a criminal act. So in some instances, we are mandated reporters. Mandated reporters are required by law to report specific types of abuse. That's going to be abuse of minors anywhere. And then the laws may differ as far as abuse of adults. In Oklahoma, we are mandated to report abuse of adults who are incapacitated, but not adults who are able to leave a situation. We also may observe, or we may be asked to testify in criminal matters in situations where we've cared for people who have been assaulted or abused. There is civil law. Civil law involves contracts and torts. Contract law has to do with legal agreements. When you sign an employment contract, that's a legal agreement. You are agreeing to work under specified conditions for a specified salary. Your employer is agreeing to maintain those conditions and to provide that salary. And so either side can break that contract. Tort law is about harms that may be done to a person in the course of our care. Tort law is actually bigger than that, but in the healthcare setting, we're talking about harm that may come to a patient because of our care that's going to involve malpractice. So we're going to get into that in a bit in more depth. Finally, we have administrative law, and this is regulations. This is things like OSHA. In healthcare, we are under OSHA oversight, nurse practice acts in each state. This does not include outside entities that accredit facilities like JACO, but it would, administrative law would include CMS because that's a government function. So there are different sources of laws and types of laws that we have to deal with, and you need to understand the definitions of those. This would be another good time to get out your vocab notebook and make sure you understand some definitions. For nursing practice, we have some legal oversight, and this is going to be under administrative law. Licensure to be a nurse is a privilege, and it's based on meeting specific requirements. In the US, we're licensed by individual states. Quite a few states now participate in the multi-state compact. The compact is an agreement among those states that they will award compact licenses only to nurses who meet the requirements of all of those states. So it's an agreement that nurses who are awarded this multi-state license are going to meet a list of requirements that all states have agreed to. In most states, you can still choose a single state license or a multi-state license. If you have a multi-state license, then you are allowed to practice in any state within the compact. If you choose a single state license, then you would have to have your license reciprocated by other states. In order to become licensed in other states, you're not going to have to go back to nursing school and retest. There are states that may require an additional course of some type. I know for Texas, you have to do a brief online ethics course in order to have your license reciprocated. And there are some other states that have similar requirements. The Nurse Practice Act in each state is state law. The Practice Act establishes a board in each state. That board regulates the scope of practice, the requirements for licensing and for license renewable, the requirements for certifications and for continuing education, policies about enforcement of those regulations, guidelines for interpreting those regulations and policies, disciplinary consequences. So any member of the public can report if they can report to the Board of Nursing in that state if they believe that a nurse is in violation of the Nurse Practice Act. Employers are obligated to report some specific things. Employers may also choose to report other things, but employers are obligated to report nurses who abandon their patients, abuse their patients, neglect patients, or divert controlled meds. I want to talk for just a second about abandonment because there's a lot of misconception about abandonment. Refusing to take an unsafe assignment is not abandonment. Leaving employment is not abandonment as an LPN or RN. If someone is an advanced practice nurse and has a caseload of patients, then they're required to, in most cases, they're required to refer those patients elsewhere and give them time to establish care somewhere else, just like a physician would be. But for an RN or LPN, abandonment is not leaving a job. In order to abandon patients, you have to have taken responsibility for those patients. So sometimes nurses go to work, they find out their assignment is unsafe. And when they say, I can't take this assignment, it's not safe, their employer says, if you don't take this assignment, I'll report you to the board for abandonment. So the Oklahoma Board of Nursing actually has a statement defining what abandonment means for that reason. One thing I want to talk about in terms of nursing regulation is impaired nurses. Chemical impairment, chemical dependency, or inappropriate drug use is very common in healthcare because we work extremely stressful jobs. We often work excessive hours. That's getting worse with the shortage in the pandemic. And so nurses sometimes begin to self-medicate in order to be able to tolerate working conditions. When that happens, those nurses may sometimes report to work impaired, which is a danger to patients. In some states, nurses have a legal duty to report if they believe another nurse is impaired. It is always better if you as a nurse find that you are struggling with substance use and unable to work safely. It is always better to self-report than to be reported by someone else. States have peer assistant programs that are created to help nurses who are impaired maintain their licensure. If you go before the board on impairment and it is found to be an accurate charge, then the Board of Nursing is generally going to have a very strict program for you to follow in order to maintain your license. Okay, so we're going to take a break. We're going to come back in the next recording and talk about some specific court actions that may be taken that are relevant to healthcare.